So welcome everyone, welcome to tonight's talk. Tonight's talk is about the heart qualities. So what I'll do is I'll first of all clarify what I mean by the heart, and then I'll just go straight to the heart of the matter and talk about the heart qualities and how we can cultivate them. So when I talk about the heart, I'm talking about this place, this spiritual centre around our chest. It's a kind of, it's recognised in neuroscience and it's recognised in a number of cultural perspectives that this place is a place of processing emotions, and it is also a place where we have connections within ourselves and others. In a number of cultures, it's recognised as this special place. I was just looking up some pictures of Jesus Christ, for example, and there's paintings of him with his heart, opening his heart, and the bleeding heart, and in yoga systems they have this the chakras. The chakras are a chakra means a wheel, and the chakras are energy circles, energy cycles, energy whirlpools, I suppose. And there's chakras on our hands, the palms of our hands, the soles of our feet, and there's various other places, but there's particularly chakras around our central part of the torso. And it's like this central part of the torso is like a magnet. It's got different poles at either end. It's like a different polarity charges at different ends. And it's like the energy goes up in a kind of like an infinity sign, but only with 7 spaces. The crown, the forehead, the neck, the heart, solar plexus, the hara or the tantien or the chakra just below our belly button, and then at the base of our spine. And it's like this energy goes up like this, and it comes back like this, and in that movement there's a wheel of energy. So when people can see it, it looks like a wheel, like a chakra. So the heart center there's 7 chakras. The heart center is central, and it seems to balance the connections with the earth and groundedness and survival and head, the crown. And I first experimented with this heart when I moved to Melbourne many years ago, 1974 and 1975, and I was getting involved in a spiritual Christian church, and we used to do hands-on healing every Saturday. So I learned about the chakras within that Christian setting. This is even before I was doing yoga and so on, and I learned to play with these energy centers by putting my hands on them. And you could put your hands on the base chakra and the crown chakra, and there would be a connection between the two. And I would move my hands up and down these chakras. And then later on, I studied massage and became a massage therapist, shiatsu in particular. But I used to work with energy centers as well. So I'd do my shiatsu, and shiatsu is awakening these energy systems anyway. But sometimes I just used to rest my hands on the chakras, and I'd always finish the massage with my hands on the heart, not in front of the heart, on the back of the heart with my patients, I suppose we could call them. And also it's interesting because I've done massage for many years, and these days I'm a psychologist, and there are ways that some of the ways I've learned mindful self-compassion, for example, they have a gesture of compassion which places the hand at the heart, which is interesting. And another thing that happens that I've noticed when I worked on Christmas Island with asylum seekers, the Afghanis, when they meet you, they put their hand on the heart. They put their hand. I'm putting it on my microphone at the moment, so you're probably just hearing a big blah blah blah. But they'd put their hand on their heart as a gesture of gratitude and greetings. It's like, oh, how do you do? It's nice to meet you, or thank you very much for doing something. So this heart, cross cultures, means something. And when I first got interested in or introduced to Buddhism, it was through Mahayana Buddhism and Tibetan Mahayana Buddhism. And we began with Vajrayana practices. In the Vajrayana practices, they have deities, and there's a number of deities. And the practice involves, first of all, visualizing the deity. It could be Chenrezig, or it could be white or green Tara, or Avalokitesvara, one of these deities, visualizing them as if they're in front. And if it's a deity of compassion, it would be, you'd visualize the deity and you imagine receiving infinite compassion, just kind of opening up to it and receiving it. And then there would be a visualization of bringing the deity down through our chakras, down to rest in our heart, and we would become one with the deity, and then from our heart we would radiate whatever the quality that they're radiating, they're emanating. So usually it was compassion. So there's this emanations from the heart. And then later I got more interested in Theravadan Buddhism, and of course the 4 heart qualities, the 4 divine abodes, were central in this, were a central feature of Theravadan Buddhist practice. I mean, for me it was a balance between inside practices, which were really quite intense for me. I would always balance them somehow with the divine abodes. And more recently, let's say in the last, 10 years or so, I've been understanding these divine abodes as boundless qualities. Boundless. Boundless is a translation of a term called appamana. Appamana means boundless. And this boundlessness and these qualities, warm benevolence, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity, are the states of the ways enlightened beings relate to themselves and others. They are qualities of relationships. So, and it's this sense of boundlessness, which is the way it was taught in early Buddhism, represents a state of awakening. So when we can abide in boundless metta, or loving kindness, for example, or karuna, compassion, or boundless mudita, or appreciative joy, empathetic joy sometimes called, or boundless equanimity. Equanimity here is a divine abode. It is the way awakened beings relate and abide, but for us to be in those states are like a temporary awakening. It's like we're abiding in those awakened states. This is the way it is to be awakened. So it's a really wonderful practice, and there are ways we can nourish and cultivate these 4 divine abodes, or boundless divine abodes. As well as the 4 divine abodes, there are other heart practices that I've discovered, and I think they're kind of aspects of the 4 divine abodes. And these are forgiveness, gratitude, and one that I learnt recently from Stephen Snyder, actually, who's a Zen and jhana teacher. And an absolute awareness teacher, innate goodness. So it's a really, these qualities all rest in our heart. So I'm going to go through these qualities and briefly describe them in the next, couple of minutes, and then talk about how we can cultivate them. So, warm benevolence or metta relates to this quality of warm friendliness. It's this wish for happiness for ourselves and others. And it's really light, it's buoyant. It's this lovely feeling of befriending ourselves and friendliness to another. I've given discourses and whole workshops on metta. Karuna or compassion, I like to borrow the term from His Holiness the Dalai Lama as sensitivity to suffering and the commitment to alleviate it, which involves an awareness of suffering, but not just an awareness of suffering, not just empathy, but action involved in the compassion, like the intention for action, the movement towards action. I mean, in neuroscience we learn about how there's different types of empathy. Not all empathy is healthy. Sometimes psychopaths can have empathy because they can tune into what's happening for you and then know how to manipulate you. So not all empathy is fantastic. Sometimes we might empathise with another person's suffering and just feel their suffering and not differentiate it as theirs and mine, and not be able to differentiate it as theirs, and so it causes us a lot of suffering. But empathy with compassion is different. There's a whole different lot of neuronal networks awakened, and it is this divine abiding. It is uplifting. The next quality, appreciative joy, it's also called mudita in Pali, is in early Buddhism they really talked about it as the joy that arises from the appreciation of another's good qualities, virtues, successes and skills and so on. The goodness of another. But when you consider that there's no real me and them, when you think about not self, there just is. I like to think about it as appreciation of good qualities, appreciation of successes and virtues, regardless of whether they're yours or mine. So this is a really uplifting quality. It's a joy. It's a kind of a bubbly experience. It's really lovely. And all of these qualities have near and far enemies. I won't go into details of the near and far enemies, otherwise I'll be here for an hour. But the next quality is equanimity. Equanimity as a divine abode means that, equanimity is a really wonderful quality. It means this, usually translates as this unshakability of heart. One is not shaken around by the ups and downs of life, by the 8 worldly winds, praise and blame, loss and gain, pain and pleasure, and fame and disrepute. One is stable. When it's considered as a divine abode, an abiding, I like to think about it as this sort of centeredness, this peacefulness, this quality of divine peacefulness that then we can radiate, we can emanate. So the other qualities I was talking about, actually I'll talk about one way we can understand these 4 heart qualities, and then I'll talk about these other these other related qualities. Analio beautifully compares these 4 heart qualities to the sun and the moon. Metta he describes as the sun at midday in a temperate climate where it's beautifully warm and where in winter you go out in the sun, it's lovely and warm. It's like the sun at midday, and it just shines on everything, warming everything. It's really beautiful. We can bask in it. Of compassion, the sun is this quality is compared to a sunset. It's kind of like beautiful, but the past is somehow, we're leaving the past behind somehow. There's some sort of there's a vibration in our heart that's not genuinely happy, but there's a sort of a soft and uplifting feeling of compassion. Of mudita, it's described as the sun rising at dawn. It's kind of this upward lifting energy, this joyous energy that makes the birds sing, and you see the sun rays coming through the space of the sky, shining on leaves and dew, and it's all really sparkly. And of equanimity, Analio describes it as a full moon on a clear night, just softly shining on everything, making it clear, but there's a softness about it. There's a real luminosity about it. So these related qualities, let's go to gratitude first. I think gratitude is very similar to, and sometimes I describe it the same as mudita, but there's a different tone to it. With mudita, there's a kind of a joy. There's a joy involved. With gratitude, often you'll find when we're having gratitude, there's a thankfulness, and there's often tears coming to our eyes. And it's kind of closer, I reckon, to a beautiful sunset rather than, the sun rising. But look, that's just me. We all know what gratitude feels like. It's a really lovely quality, and it's uplifting. The next quality, forgiveness. Forgiveness, I think, if we look at that term forgive, it means to bring back to a former state. Come back to a former state, and it's like we are hurt by ourselves, our own actions towards ourselves, or another's actions towards us, and it's like we carry that hurt around like a burden on our shoulders. When we forgive, it is like we're bringing back to a former state. We're kind of releasing that burden we're carrying around and putting it back. We're letting it go. And it is this a feeling of relief and lightness. Now, innate goodness, as I mentioned earlier, only recently in the last, 6 or 7 months, I've started learning about innate goodness, and I've been practicing innate goodness practice. It's really wonderful. And it's described by Stephen Snyder, who's a Zen practitioner. He teaches about absolute. He teaches very much about the manifest and unmanifest aspects of the absolute. And innate goodness is a recognition of the absolute, and realizing and recognizing our own wonderful innate goodness. Our goodness that's not dependent on someone's praise or us getting rewarded for doing things or acting in particular ways or succeeding in anything in particular. It's just the way we are. If we go back to our sources, I suppose, it is that genuine innate goodness that we are. And something that's really interesting, I've noticed, is if we can recognize our own innate goodness, we can also recognize the innate goodness in others. All we need to do is look at them and we'll see their innate goodness. And if we can recognize innate goodness in another, we can also recognize it in ourselves. So, I'm aware of the time and I won't go on for too much longer. I just wanted to mention how we can now cultivate these qualities. And the way I do it is that I, first of all, just bring attention to my heart. Bring awareness to my heart. It's a soft awareness. It's not like a penetrating, insightful investigation. It's just a soft awareness to my heart. Then I'll just tune into these particular qualities in my heart. Sometimes I might kindle it, I might spark it with reminders. Now, with loving kindness or warm metta, what I remember is one of my 6 grandchildren squealing with joy when they're about 3 or 4, something like that. Like this, they're just so lovable that you have this warm quality of loving kindness, benevolence awakening in your heart. It brings a smile to your heart, and that becomes like a sign that we rest our attention there, and we just let go of the ego, we let go of trying, and we just nourish it, and it nourishes it all by itself, and it grows all by itself. It just fills us. And then we let it become boundless, let it become like appamana, boundless. Compassion, what I use is either my own suffering or the suffering of another. I'll notice there's a kind of a movement in my heart when I see another suffering, or when I think of my own suffering, like I might have had some heavy days or a hard time, I go to myself, oh, poor old Malcolm. Poor old Malcolm. Yeah. So there's a little bit of compassion there, and I just nourish that as well. Let my awareness rest there, and it just kind of grows and grows, and then it just becomes boundless. It's lovely. Mudita. I used to think of the person that's used for mudita, in the systems, in the Visuddhimagga anyway, is a person who is naturally jolly and virtuous, naturally happy, like thinking of someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or I used to often think of John Hale, for example, one of my teachers. Just naturally virtuous. I kind of celebrate in their virtuous qualities. But more recently, when I did a long retreat on emptiness and the 4 boundless divine abodes, I recognised that if I can think of someone's good deeds, it can awaken a sense of appreciation. And that appreciation, I just nourish that. It's like you get appreciation, you get the sign of appreciation in your heart, then you just sit with that. You let go of what stimulated it, you let go of the kindling, and you let it stimulate. On my recent retreat, I used to think of, a retreat I did last year actually, or 2 years ago, 2 years ago, not last year. Last year, not this year. I would think of my partner Mary, and what such a good person she is, how generous and kind she is. And that would awaken a joy of appreciation. With upekkha or equanimity, generally what I do is I think of the freedom I have when I can let go of my ego. And I see things as causes and conditions rather than people wandering around doing things. Just things coming together as causes and conditions, taking the personalities out of this equation and just seeing life as causes and conditions arising and passing. And as a response to that, I have a sense of peacefulness or a matter-of-factness. And it's a kind of a tone in one's heart. Then again, just sit with that, let it grow. With innate goodness, and this has been a really lovely one, again, I think of my grandchildren. And I think of times when I've just looked at people, regardless of age and regardless of my relationship to them, and I've seen something like the divine in them. I think of that. And it could be anybody, any age, but it's really easy with my grandchildren. And I then look in my own heart and recognize that I'm also like that. So I find my own innate goodness. Stephen Snyder describes it as a feeling of lightness and buoyancy, like he comes from a cold climate, so he talks about a warm breeze. You know, I would describe it as a cool breeze. There's a real lightness in your heart, so you just stay there. And it seems to radiate, so you seem to contact it in a lovely way. And have I talked about forgiveness? No. Forgiveness. I usually say a prayer. There's a lovely forgiveness prayer. Forgiveness, when I first learned about the 4 divine abodes and how to practice them, they would precede with a forgiveness practice. And I learned about these divine abodes back in 1976, actually, or late 1975, 1976. And it was always taught, before you did a session of metta, you would do a request for forgiveness and providing forgiveness. So there is a beautiful prayer that I read, and maybe I'll finish this little talk off with this prayer. And you can all, you can't join me because you don't have it, but it's easy to get. It's the Buddha's prayer of forgiveness. And if you can't find it, feel welcome to email me and I'll send you a copy. So, Buddha's prayer of forgiveness. If I have harmed anyone in any way, either knowingly or unknowingly, through my own confusions, I ask their forgiveness. If anyone has harmed me in any way, either knowingly or unknowingly, through their own confusions, I forgive them. And if there is a situation I'm not yet ready to forgive, I forgive myself for that. For all the ways that I harm myself, negate, doubt, belittle myself, judge or be unkind to myself through my own confusions, I forgive myself. And that's the way I do the forgiveness. It's like, again, it is a feeling, but I think it's a little bit, because it's sort of cognitive, I reckon to say a prayer is a good way to awaken forgiveness. So thank you very much. I trust this brief talk about the heart qualities has been helpful, and may we all be happy, peaceful and free.